We got Alex and Amy recording their lines for the intro before they left, right? Right? Oh shit.
Okay, I got this. In this episode of Everyday Too Exotic,
the car gives Alex a tongue twister.
And up here, we have a rear windshield washer squirter.
Amy hides one yarn to rule them all.
My precious, precious yarn.
and Alex and Amy describe their Rotary experience.
It's more like driving a pissed-off chainsaw.
When you like a car enough that you don't want to stop driving it.
All this and more on today's episode of Everyday Too Exotic.
So dumb. I love it though. Okay.
But first, let's take a look into the car's history.
The Mazda RX-7 is probably the best-known rotary engine car produced. The engine's origin, however, began in Germany with a small car and motorcycle manufacturer called NSU Motorenwerk, whose engineer, Felix Wankel, designed the first prototype rotary engine, premiering a prototype in 1957. This engine utilized a distinctly different design to the traditional piston engine, featuring a triangular rotor with an eccentric rotation and a housing that acted as a combustion chamber. A significant advantage of the design is that it had very few moving parts, essentially comprised of a rotor and a crankshaft, which continuously rotated in the same direction throughout the combustion cycle.
NSU went on to build the first rotary engine car and proceeded to license the patent for the rotary engine to a number of different manufacturers around the world, most of whom never ventured beyond prototypes, except for a small Japanese company called Mazda.
Mazda, or as it originally called Toyo Kogyo, was an automobile producer founded in Hiroshima, Japan in 1920, initially as a company that produced corks. The company branched into machine tools and then created the Mazda Go auto rickshaw in 1931 as their first motorized vehicle.
Following World War II, Mazda produced a few microcars, primarily for the Japanese market, until in the 1960s they decided to focus their engineering and development on cars based around NSU's new Wankel rotary engine. The first rotary engine car that Mazda produced was the Cosmos Sport in 1967. With this new car and engine, Mazda began to explore export markets with both their piston and rotary-powered cars.
Rotary engine vehicles quickly attained a following, largely due to their good performance and lightweight, making them an ideal competitor for V6 and even V8 engines at the time. The Mazda rotaries were fitted to a series of vehicles, from fairly sporty cars like the RX-2, 3, and 4, as well as to a rotary engine pickup and even a bus. The gas crisis of 1973, however, hurt sales of the thirsty rotary engine, and the company decided to focus the rotary engine on the sports car market, launching the RX-7 in 1978.
The RX-7 was designed primarily by Mazda's lead designer Matsuburo Maeda. The rotary engine, in a dual rotor form, with a displacement of 1,146 cubic centimeters, was an ideal fit for a lightweight sports car. Its compact package easily fitted behind the front wheels in a very light, unibody design, giving the car near-perfect weight balance. The small engine produced 100 horsepower in a car that weighed little more than 2,300 pounds.
The car's success was highlighted by factory-backed racing in the United States, taking first and second place in the 24 Hours of Daytona in 1979, and winning the IMSA GTU Championship 7 years in a row, and the GTO Championship 10 years in a row, making the RX-7 the car to win more IMSA championships than any other.
The first generation RX-7 continued to evolve over its production and eventually introduced a new top-level submodel in 1984, the GSL-SE, which built on the other changes by upgrading the displacement to 1,308 cc and adding electronic fuel injection, bumping power output to 135 horsepower.
This last model was short-lived, however, when the entire first generation was retired in 1985 to be replaced by two subsequent generations, which further improved the technology, adding turbochargers and further developing the rotary engine.
Our car is a 1984 Mazda RX-7 GSL-SE, which we bought as a high-mileage driver. We have since addressed all the mechanical issues, repainted the car, replaced a number of worn or broken components, and otherwise cleaned the car up significantly for the condition we purchased the car in. There is still a lot of improvement possible on this car, especially in the interior, which has generally held up well but is showing its over 150,000 miles of wear.
So the Haugland Collection is primarily comprised of European cars. That said, there's been a few other influential cars from other countries that have slipped in. And one of them that definitely fits is the Mazda RX-7. This really is the best known of the rotary engine cars produced. And first generation to me is probably the purest example of sort of what that intention was. The later cars have better performance, are faster, they've got turbos, there's a lot of really cool things about them too. But this is kind of where that sporting emphasis for the Mazda RX-7 began.
So this car is the height of the wedge in terms of design. The wedge-shaped car was incredibly popular in the 70s and 80s, and this is kind of the epitome of that.
It didn't really break any new ground. If you looked at other cars that came out in the time period, you had like the Porsche 924, honestly, the Ferrari Daytona. There's a bunch of cars that kind of set the grounds for this shape.
But it is one of the coolest Japanese cars of its era. One of the things that makes it cool is the pop-up headlights. That automatically makes the car cool. There is no argument.
That said, it's also an iconic thing for the wedge-shaped cars.
Absolutely, because you want headlights that will flow with the car as opposed to sticking up or sticking out, but you want something that's functional when you actually need light.
Just about everything about the design of this car has more to do with aerodynamics and handling than just about anything else. The entire shape is streamlined from the front bumper all the way up to a really well sloped back windscreen that then comes over the roof, tapers out to a little bit of a camtail in the back. There's very little to interfere with the flow of air over this car. So that allows you to potentially have a pretty high top speed, even without a ton of power. One of the big advantages of that rotary engine that's in here is it's small. And so the entire engine fits behind the center line of the axles, even with all of this extra amount up front, at which point the weight balance ends up being very good. And it allows you to have this really low hood line that helps make this car really, really streamlined.
Something else that that contributes to is fuel efficiency, which you kind of need with this very, very thirsty rotary engine. It doesn't exactly counteract the thirstiness of the rotary engine, but it does help.
So also classic for cars of this time period is there's basically no chrome on this. It's body color in black, more or less, for almost the entire car, other than like the alloy wheels and things like that. Earlier versions, the bumper wasn't as nicely integrated. It wasn't necessarily body color. It kind of stood out a bit more. Later on, they started going more into the 80s styling of, okay, we're gonna paint the bumper to match the body. We're gonna integrate its shape into the body so it just flows in and becomes part of the shape of the car, front and back.
And again, most of the time, I am absolutely into the chrome. I love that shiny jewel setting kind of look. But on this, it would be inappropriate. It wouldn't look right. Just keeping it to red and black looks right.
The few tiny little bits of chrome that you have are things like the badging on the side, the door lock, because you make that out of black, even black anodized metal.
It won't be black for long.
But otherwise, everything else on this car is black. The downside with that is there's a lot of plastic on this car, and that's one of the other things that came in with a lot of cars in the 80s. The problem with plastic is plastic ages, and as it ages, it gets more and more brittle, and so it doesn't hold up as well. And when it breaks, you're getting fewer and fewer opportunities to find replacements. So unless they reproduce the parts, it can be hard to find for some of these cars. So one of the nice things about pop-up headlights is this is still of the era when in the United States you were required to have sealed beam headlights in your cars. And the pop-up headlight does a good job of taking that 7-inch sealed beam that really is not that pretty and takes a lot of space and makes it go away when you don't need it. You basically have your standard 7-inch sealed beam. You can replace these with like an H4 bulb headlight assembly if you want. It just pops up on its own on motors. There's a nice little switch inside that allows you to do it without turning on the headlights, which makes it easier to change bulbs and clean and do all sorts of things like that. And that's what Amy is flipping inside. And otherwise, they work pretty well. Occasionally you'll see them fail where like one will pop up, things like that. Fortunately, this one doesn't do this sort of weird Popeye thing.
The strange winkies.
The other thing you'll notice is that there's not much visible as far as a way for air to get into the cooling system. To get to that, you really have to get entirely underneath the nose. And this section of the nose is just a set of slats that slant up slightly so that air coming underneath the car gets drawn up into the engine bay, into the radiator. The radiator basically still cools fairly effectively on this, but it relies on that airflow from underneath the car. And it means that you really have this very clean front. You don't have a grill in here. And the grill is almost unnoticeable when you're standing up looking at this very low car.
So the front bumper is fully integrated.
And plastic.
And plastic. You have your turn signals, which are fully integrated into the bumper. And then just, black plastic. At this point, it's kind of an accent because, again, the entire bumper is one piece.
And this carries down the side of the car as these side bumper moldings all the way down the length of the car. So it kind of wraps around the entire car, creating that dividing line, essentially, in the styling.
Which is good, especially on a red car. Having that black definition line is aesthetically pleasing.
As you can see from the profile of the car, you have this just absolutely streamlined shape all the way down. For the most part, this is as they built them. There's only a few things that have been changed on this, and most of them are very, very, very minor. So, we still have the original mirrors, the door trim, black door handles. The gutter molding is black, kind of everything's black.
One of the interesting things about the Mazda RX-7 is that this back hatch area is pretty much all glass. You have your side windows, and then you have the actual hatch panel, rear window, and they look like they're all one piece, but they're not. They have just a little seam here, but there's no framing or trim separating them. So it just looks like one whole window.
And your rear hatch is basically just entirely made out of glass with bits hanging from it.
So these cars have a integrated body color gas flap. On earlier cars, this would have had a lock. So this being the highest level trim option, this is actually activated by an electric switch inside the car, which Alex will demonstrate.
As soon as I find it,
There it goes. And it just pops open. And there's your gas cap. And you just push it closed. And people can't siphon your gas, hypothetically.
So as we mentioned in the history, these cars were very successful in IMSA racing in the GTU class. And Mazda really capitalized on that, marketing this in the US. And so both of the cars I've had have the sticker that was installed by Mazda. As right here it says, 80, 81, 82, 83, Mazda RX-7 IMSA GTU Manufacturers Championship. Basically, they won all of the years, more or less, that this car was made from 80 on. And you can tell that this sticker was developed probably in 1982, and then it's the, oh crap, we have another year to add. So we have 1980, 81, 82, and then 83 in a different text that isn't integrated in the artwork, because this is the 1984 model. Now, of course, if this was a 1985 model, they'd be trying to figure out how to cram in 1984 as well. So from the back end of the car, there's a few other things that you'll notice as far as features on this. One is we have a rear wiper. And to go with the rear wiper, we have up here a rear windshield washer squirter that allows us to basically clean the back window just like the front. It's not something I tend to see that much on cars, even if they have a rear wiper of this era.
Also, we have rear defroster for the full window. I kind of like that you can see the motor for the wiper right there. We're not hiding this. This is just there.
When the entire rear hatch is made out of glass, how do you hide it?
Yeah, where are you going to put it?
It has to be there. Faded here does say RX-7. It's not very clear anymore, but this car's seen a lot of time.
And a lot of use. So, it's been out there. It's had adventures.
There are multiple series of these as far as models in the first generations of these. So you had a GS, you had a GSL, you had the GSL-SE, and then I think you also had a base just Mazda RX-7. And each one had different features. The GS was an up-trim version of the base one. The GSL added a limited slip rear differential. The GSL-SE added to that fuel injection, a bigger engine, and a bunch of other changes that we'll get to when we get into the mechanicals.
One of the other things I like design-wise about this car is how the taillights appear to completely cover this back section of the car. They are flat to the body of the car. They are fully integrated. And it looks almost like a trim piece, but it isn't. I just think that's very cool. And I love all the, the lines that kind of go through it. So it's not just a big solid piece. I just find that stylistically happy.
We do have a little cutout here for the hatch to open it and the key lock to theoretically let you open it with the key. So I find it easier to actually use the switch inside most of the time. So we'll go ahead and open the hatch and talk about the inside. You can lift it up, and it's held up by gas struts. As typical of cars in this era, these things fail, and this thing's not very light. So my first one, we used a golf club. That was your prop. I got the golf club with the car. I didn't actually play golf. So see previous mentions about why we measure things in wine, not sets of golf clubs. Although you probably could actually put a couple sets of golf clubs in here. So on a more practical note, however, there's plenty of space in here for wine, actually. Again, you have the downside that you can see it and it's in the sun or whatever if you're driving around, but you could easily fit probably about like 9 cases back here without too much issue. It's not outstandingly deep, but it does go all the way to the front. It's a very large open space. So lots of room in order to put whatever you need. One of the things you'll see here though also is these wires hanging from the shocks. What those do is they actually power the wiper motor. As this comes up and down, there are contacts in this piece here that make contacts in this piece here and makes that connection to allow that wiper motor to work. Fortunately, you can still get shocks that you can actually mount that stuff to and swap it over from shock to shock as you have to replace them, because we did have to replace these when we got the car.
These little springy things, those are for powering the heated rear window so that your defroster works.
The interior of this car has seen a fair amount of abuse. This mat here is one that we actually cut to fit that's made out of rubber. The original carpet underneath it is really disintegrating, and underneath that is another piece of rubber that is also truly disintegrating. But under all of that is a rolling donut spare. Closing the hatch, just push down against the shocks, and we're done.
So the only other thing that we have back here is the antenna. These were originally powered. This one is not, because the electrically weird way that they were powered originally does not work well with aftermarket modern radios.
I've dealt with it before. It involves like creative custom wiring to make it operate, but it's just much easier to put in a manual antenna. And that's what the previous owner of this car did.
So we're gonna mix things up on this one, go with the interior next. But first we're gonna look at a very special feature of this car from the outside. So we open the door, flip the seat forward. So back here, we have these little cubbies. There's one on each side. They're pretty deep. You can put, snacks in there.
Oil, extra stuff for the car,
Tools, things you don't want to have visible through the rear hatch. And then
Amy would pack it full of yarn.
I would absolutely pack it full of yarn. But it's a nice sort of security feature in case you have something that you don't want everybody to get into. So here we go. So this car has a sunroof, and Alex is going to help me show you how it operates. So we have this knob that I turn gently because plastic.
Now we're actually going to take it off the car because we can. So the way we do that is we come in here, and there are a couple latches and a safety lever that we have to hit. And then I can lift it up. If I'm careful, I can wiggle it out of the slots it fits in the front, and the entire panel comes off. And now Amy can turn that knob and wind down the lift mechanism again.
All right, so now we can talk about the interior in general. This car has a lot of plastic, a lot of vinyl, a lot of cloth. These are not, wool carpets or anything. These are, your good basic carpets. They're showing some wear. And this car has a lot of miles on it. I love the not quite but almost shag carpet on the door. I have a little door pocket and the usual things that are on the inside of a door. Handles, latches, stuff like that. I have this cool Mazda steering wheel. It tells me that my horn is in the center and in the right place, but I'm not going to turn the power on because if I do that, then it will yell at me because the door is ajar. This is the 1980s, and they were very into alerts about, oh no, you're draining your battery, or please don't drive down the road with your door open. Yeah, just in case you need that warning. So over here, I love the toggle switches. This is one of the things that I love about this interior. This is the headlight up, headlight down, hazards, things like that. It's honestly fairly standard over here. I like that pretty much everything is labeled nicely, like, hey, here's how you open the rear, here's how you open your gas cap. This car has cruise control, There's a little tiny button here that's marked cruise, right next to our cigarette lighter, which of course we have one of those. One other very cool thing that's in here is that we do have a clock that works, and it's digital. This is not the original radio. We didn't change this, the previous owner did. Ashtray. Very smooth and quiet. No change in there. Stick shift, electric windows. This little knob is interesting. It's totally useless in our car because this controlled like the way the sound worked in the overly complicated radio system that was originally in this car. So you could shift your sound balance using this little knob. It is not conveniently located because, I mean, this is just an area where you're gonna bump stuff all the time. So it's like your sound balance will be constantly shifting. It's still there, it's still part of the car, but it doesn't work with the current radio. Locking glove box, more security. And on this side, the toggle switches are for heat and to activate the windshield washer in the front. I love the physical toggle switches. There's just something very cool about not having an electronic button, but having an actual physical thing that moves. Of course, it's also plastic, so, you know, there are times when those sorts of things break. But these have held up pretty well. Things that have held up less well are like the little slats in the vents. Those just sort of disintegrate. Plastic doesn't like a lot of temperature change. And this car was not necessarily garaged its whole life. Eventually you do park things outside. Over the course of like 40 years, things break, things wear, and that's okay. Alex and I have been to several car events, and one of the things that you do at car events is you go shopping. So one of the cool things that we bought specifically for this car is the keychain. It's a rotary engine. Not only is it a rotary engine, but it rotaries. So, you know, if you need a fidget, that's great. And now for the moment we've all been waiting for. Alex with the mechanicals.
Okay, I'm gonna go and open up the bonnet here, and we'll get this show on the road here. Not uncommon for a race car. Hood opens forward, that way if it comes unlatched for one reason or another, it doesn't fly up and hit the windscreen. So here we have our rotary engine. This is what makes this car more special than anything else. This is what they call a 13B, which basically means it's about a 1.3 liter rotary engine. A fairly good size engine for a rotary. Now, a rotary engine is actually, if anything, closer to a two-stroke in the way that it operates, and as a result, tends to generate more power for the displacement than what you tend to see on your typical four-stroke engine. However, also like a two-stroke engine, it tends to have a lot more problems with being fuel efficient and having good emissions. This being a 13B and fuel injected, we have the RE rotary engine EGI, electronic gas injection. I don't know why not EFI like everyone else was using, but I guess gasoline is fuel, so makes it nice and easy. The intake is on this side of the engine and basically comes in kind of about the halfway point, essentially. And as the rotor rotates, it picks up air from the intake, compresses it, and then ignites on that side of the engine. So there are only two rotors in here, but you'll notice that we have 4 spark plugs, 2 per rotor. And our distributor cap here has 2 coils coming in, and 4 spark plug wires coming out. So for each rotation, it sparks twice. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the shape of the combustion chamber on a rotary engine is not very efficient. The way that it burns, it tends to leave a lot of unburnt fuel. So that second spark doesn't really generate more power. What it does do, however, is that it ends up burning a bit of the fuel that didn't get lit the first time, which then reduces the emissions and makes this a little bit of a cleaner car. They kind of had to do that in order to basically get these past emissions going into the rules that were coming in place mostly in the 70s and the 80s. These engines being fairly early fuel injection still rely on a lot of vacuum valves and things like that rather than necessarily having electronic controls. There's no real computer running the system for the most part in the more modern sense. A lot of the ways that the engine works and its efficiency comes off of a bunch of little solenoids that are down here that have like electronic switches and things to them, but it basically controls vacuum flow around the engine. Fortunately, there's a vacuum diagram here underside the hood, which is original to the car and tells you sort of theoretically what should be connected what and where. Half the time when these cars start going bad, it's because you've got problems with the vacuum system. One of the downsides is, again, talking about plastic. These vacuum solenoids are made out of plastic. They've got little hose fittings that push onto them. The hoses get stiff with time. The plastic gets brittle with time. It's very, very common for them to break. And that can be a real issue when you try and actually sort out problems with the way these cars run. Our air box is here with our air filter. Because, again, emissions, this has a carbon canister, so it captures fuel vapor essentially in the fuel system rather than venting to the atmosphere. And so there's a carbon canister here. We have cruise control on this car. It is operated off of this solenoid here that basically attaches directly to our throttle linkage. Otherwise, one of the other features of these engines is they do not cool very well on their own. There is no good way to cool these from the outside. Essentially, you can run water through the water jacket around the outside, but nothing cools that rotor on the inside. So it relies very heavily on oil cooling. This has an oil cooler mounted up front below the radiator. Otherwise, this is basically the standard layout for the rotary engines at the time. It's a fairly efficient motor. It's very compact. Basically, the bulk of the engine sits entirely behind our front wheels. So it feeds to the back through a 5-speed gearbox in this car. Most of the rest of the drivetrain's fairly straightforward. The wheels on this, if we come around, are the correct alloys as what was fitted in the GSL-SE. It's a 14-inch wheel and the matching tire. These cars ended up going to a later bolt pattern. To some extent, there's an advantage to that. There's more wheel options in this size and things like that. Unfortunately, there's not a great amount of tire options for a performance sports car in this size anymore. So finding the right tires for this car was a little bit tricky. So as we move back through the car, through our 5-speed transmission, which is actually a really nice gearbox, it shifts very well. That's something Mazda generally has done very well. It's part of what makes the Miata a great car, is it has a wonderful gearbox. But it comes back, and the rear axle on this is actually a solid axle. So we've got good independent front suspension, but a solid axle in the rear with trailing arms and coil springs. Okay, and with that, let's go ahead and close up the hood, and we'll be on our way on a beautiful drive. There we go. Time to put away the knitting.
So this is a car that sparks joy for me. I am so happy to be driving this car. I would happily drive this for miles and miles. I would take this to the coast. I would take this everywhere. This is what, when I ever thought of sports cars as a child, which is not often, but this is what I thought a sports car should be like. And that's still kind of how I feel. I mean, it's not maybe as powerful. It definitely does not have that raw joy of driving, whereas this is just easy. I don't have to worry about anything, and I love that. The steering is pretty precise. It accelerates well, it brakes well. Shifting is easy, like super easy. It's also made so that short little people could drive it, which is great. I'm in a very comfortable driving position for me, and it's also really nice that Alex can also put it in a very comfortable driving position for him. I'm just driving along here in fourth, and on these curves, all I have to do is take my foot off the gas. I'm braking a tiny bit, but not very much, and I don't have to downshift. That's really nice. I can, I'm good at downshifting, but I don't have to. It allows me to just enjoy the road.
I'm dipping and I'm driving, I'm scraping and I'm climbing, the future's bright and blinding.
And I should point out that this is my first time driving this, and I am super, super comfy. I mean, from the get-go. This took no getting used to. Other than I really, really want to drive it fast, but I'm being safe. So remember, kids, even if the car whispers in your ear and says, oh, you should go faster. Don't listen to the car. Not if it tells you to go faster.
I don't know if I endorse that statement entirely, but that's fine.
Well, I did just floor it. It makes me want to, like, park my Jag for a while and just drive this.
I mean, this is one of the advantages of the collection. There are opportunities to take these cars out and actually just go out and enjoy them.
Yes.
I mean, this is the first generation RX-7 I've owned. The first one we had when we got married. And that one was overall not a bad car, but one of the classic issues with the Rotary is if you overheat it at all, you tend to blow the seals in the engine. And the engine being built like a stacked sandwich, rebuilding it means basically full rebuild of the engine. Full disassembly, full reassembly, all new seals, all new whatever. It's not a cheap process. And at the time, the car wasn't worth the time and effort.
And then it's an expensive rebuild.
Yes.
And so that's something to take into account, folks, if you ever want to purchase an RX-7, is the prices for them are going up because they are a rarer car.
Yeah. And part of it is, again, the Rotary engines are great, but they do wear out. This car has over 150,000 miles on it.
Yes.
The engine's been rebuilt, replaced, and all of that. So, I mean, it's not like it's a worn-out car, but there are bits and pieces that are really showing their age.
That's part of the problem, I think, with 1980s and later cars. They weren't as collectible, I think, at the time. They weren't thinking about that, and so they don't reproduce the parts as much.
And part of that is also just the nature of how they were built. By the late 70s, coming into the 80s, cars were mostly plastic. And plastic works great for about 10, 15 years. It starts getting harder and fragile and brittle and it starts breaking. And that's really a big part of it. And when you have to do things like pull apart the center console to change the radio or fix the HVAC or something like that, you tend to break the little tabs that hold it in because it was designed to go in just by like snapping it in place. Well, it no longer snaps out of place nicely, so you run into those problems.
And that happens with like temperature changes. I mean, you know, most of these cars were driven every day. They weren't kept in a nice climate controlled garage. They weren't pampered. This is not a pampered car. This car has been used. It has been driven. It has been loved.
I'm making moves. Hey, hey, watch me. Hey, hey, watch me. Hey, hey. I'm making moves.
It's a car for everyone. It's if you want a little sporty car that you can use every day that is not underpowered, because as we all know, I love the little underpowered ones, but I also love the little properly powered ones. And that's what I'd say about this car. It is properly powered. It's an everyday sports car. It's an everyman sports car. Or every woman. Guys, gals, non-binary pals.
Yes. Quote.
To quote.
I'm running, watch me. I'm running, watch me.
Well, I feel like that's all I need to say about that. I don't want to stop driving, but we don't have all day.
Yeah. We'll need to trade out.
Yes.
I will take a shot at it.
Making moves.
No, mine. No. It is nice to feel that way, though. When you like a car enough that you don't want to stop driving it, that is a good feeling.
Absolutely.
I'm making moves, making moves, making moves.
So the area that I'm driving right now actually is a little bit nostalgic, especially in relation to this car, because my first RX-7 that I mentioned earlier is one that I bought from a friend's father who happened to live on this very road. So this was the very first road I ever drove an RX-7 on. And of the 80s sports cars, they're pretty much the one I really wanted. And so it was great to actually get one, get behind the wheel. I've always been fascinated by the Rotary engine, just that it's a different sound, it's a different characteristic. It's almost more like driving a pissed-off chainsaw because it has a little bit more of a two-stroke note to it and things like that. It doesn't sound like any other engine. And they're high-revving, and they don't have a lot of torque at the bottom end, honestly. It's one of those things where they really build power the faster you spin the thing. But because they don't go back and forth like a piston does, it just builds momentum and more momentum and more momentum and just gets to be a faster car. I mean, it has a 7,000 RPM red line, so you've got lots of capability to go faster and such. And it's a nice, fun, windy road. It has some tight turns and things. There are areas that you have to slow down, but this is really where this car excels. The brakes are good, the clutch is light, the steering is light. It's manual steering, it's a recirculating ball steering system, so there is some play in it. I mean, I can fiddle with the steering wheel, but it's not bad. The handling of this is very neutral. It's just does this beautifully. Just sweeps through the curve exactly the way that you want it to. I mean, one big advantage of this car is because the clutch is light, it shifts easily and things like that. It's a good city car. But it's also perfectly happy cruising down highways and cruising down high-speed roads. It's sort of a good example of perfecting what a car can be as far as a sports car. It meets all your needs, other than if you need to put people in the back.
Yeah, no. Not a good family car. Unless your family is two.
Yes. As I recall, there was an optional rear seat for these, which was pretty much a joke because you couldn't actually put anyone in it. The advantage, I think, of the rear seat was you paid money for it when you bought the car, and it decreased your insurance cost because now it's a four-seater. I'm not sure how well that really worked in the long run because so many people who bought these drove the heck out of them and at high speed and crashed them and things, and they're an expensive car to insure. When I bought my first one, I actually had to sort of like convince my insurance company to like accept it as a car that I would own and be able to drive. I was young at the time, so that didn't help. 19, 20 when I bought the car, I think.
Yeah, because you were 25 when we got married.
Yes. And I'd already had it a few years.
Yep. It's fun to think about, you know, cars of young adulthood. I didn't really get that experience because I didn't get my license until I was in my 30s. And I'm happy with how things turned out, but I think that it would have been easier if I had learned to drive at a younger, more fearless age. But then it wouldn't be the same experience on our channel, because my relative inexperience contrasts with your wide experience.
Yep.
And so I think that helps make this more interesting.
I think so.
This is probably the first car that we've done that I have sat here in the passenger seat and thought, well, it's nice, but it's nowhere near as much fun as being in the driver's seat. So here we are, back from an amazing drive. I had so much fun. I hope you had at least half as much fun as I did.
If I had half as much fun as you did, then you had twice as much fun as me. Or something like that. I can't remember exactly how that joke goes, but...
That is exactly how that joke goes. In any case...
Time for the Haugland Score!
It's time for the Haugland Score!
Okay, here's how it works.
Alex and I have individually rated the car in 5 categories, each with a rank of 0 to 10. Then we add our scores together to give us the final Haugland score.
After we combine our scores, the results go up on the board. Okay, so performance, I gave the car a 7.5. It's a very easy car to get in, get behind the wheel. It brakes well, it handles well, it corners well. It doesn't have necessarily the best acceleration, but this is what I like to call a momentum car. Because of the handling, you can get up to speed, and then as you get to corners, you don't have to slow down significantly. You basically carry that speed through the corners because it corners so beautifully.
I gave it a 9.5. And the reason for that is because I felt like the acceleration was great, the brakes were great, the clutch was light, the steering was fantastic, the handling was great. So for me, it performed beautifully, and so I may have been a little generous.
Yeah, but you love this car.
I do.
Next is styling, and I gave the car a 7. I like the styling of it. It's a very nice, very clean looking wedge. The interior has some oddities and things that I'm not as fond of. It's a lot of plastic. It's a lot of 1980s.
And I gave it an 8 for similar reasons. It's not the most gorgeous of cars, but it does have its own distinctive style. It looks quick and sporty, and that's what it is. So for drivability, I gave it an 8, which is a little generous, I feel, considering that you can only put 2 people in it. All your stuff is exposed in the back, so it's not a multi-errand car. On the other hand, it's very sporty and very easy to drive in most road conditions. I wouldn't necessarily drive it in the snow. And it's small enough that you can park it pretty much anywhere.
I actually also gave it an 8. And a lot of that is you who had never driven this car could hop in and you were perfectly fine and at home. It is a very drivable car. It doesn't have a back seat. You can't really carry a lot of people. You can't carry a lot of stuff in it. But it's a very, very usable car. So for significance, I gave the car a 6. It's significant mostly for being the car that a lot of people associate as being one of the first rotary engine cars. But it isn't the first rotary engine car. It's not even Mazda's first rotary engine car. It's not a car that I think has broken so many molds aside from being a rotary.
And I also gave it a 6 for very similar reasons. It is the introduction for a lot of people to the rotary engine, but it's not super significant in Mazda's history, and it's not super significant in the history of automotive development in general.
Absolutely.
So for delight, I don't think anybody's going to be surprised. I gave this a 10. I had so much fun. I did not want to get out of the driver's seat. I wanted to keep going. Other people turn and look at it and smile. I do understand that the engine is quite thirsty, which is why I'm not allowed to drive it every day. But I would if gas was free.
I gave it a 6. This is where we disagree.
I'm not surprised.
I enjoy the car, honestly. I enjoy driving it. I think there are people who do enjoy seeing it, but it's, again, not a car a lot of people go out of their way saying, ooh, look, it's a Mazda RX-7. So for me, it's not a 10 for that reason. Adding all this up gives us a final score of 76 points for our 1985 Mazda RX-7. Unfortunately, that means it clashes with our Maserati Bora. And as we've done before, we need to rank these cars to each other, and we can't have 2 cars that rank the same. So we need to determine which is better and exactly where our Mazda RX-7 actually fits in the Haugland score.
Car clash?
Car clash.
The Mazda RX-7 and the Maserati Bora.
To make this happen, I'm going to list a couple positives for each car and a couple negatives. You do the same, and then we determine which one beats the other one out.
We'll give the winner a small bonus, just to give it its own spot in the ranking. Okay, so as much as I love this car, and again, would probably drive it way more often than the Maserati Bora, I have no justification. I seriously believe the Maserati Bora is a better car.
To be honest, I agree. The advantage that this has is, in a lot of ways, that it is an easier car to drive every day. The Bora is a fantastic car. It's got better performance, it's got amazing brakes, it's got stunning styling, it has a lot of strong advantages. The RX-7's biggest advantage is it is small, nimble, fairly quick. I can park it anywhere, and I don't worry about taking it down to the grocery store. But in almost everything else, the Bora is the better car.
Yes, weirdly, if you gave me the choice, which one would you buy? I would buy this, because it's more practical for my lifestyle. But the Bora is objectively better at being a car.
So this creates a bit of a dilemma, because last time we resolved this by subtracting a half point from the car and basically ranking it a little bit lower. If we do that again, this then ends up car clashing with our Triumph Italia, which is also a great car. I think this is better than the Italia. And a lot of that is how easy this is to get in and drive and use every day. It is a more drivable car in many ways than the Italia is. We need to drop this a bit, but not necessarily a full half point.
Oh.
My inclination is let's just take off, let's say, 0.2 of a point. Let's put this at 75.8. And that should allow it to sit in a nice zone that I think is pretty reasonable right now, but leaves a little bit above and a little bit below.
All right, with our revised math, that gives our 1985 RX-7 75.8 points.
Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, Follow us on Instagram, definitely follow us on YouTube. Follow us wherever you can find us. We're all kinds of places.
Thanks for taking us past 6,000 subscribers, y'all. That's very exciting.
And with that, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.